Welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. This week we're looking back at the hot comics from September 2nd, 2022, and I'm recording this on March 2nd, 2023. As always, I give you those dates so you know when this information is actually relevant, because the market is always moving and changing. As always, we're also looking back at the CBSI Hot Top 10 and the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week. I've been doing this a little over 4 years. Those are the lists I've been using the whole time, so I continue to use those two lists. Each week they put out a list of 10 books that are kind of either jumping in price or more copies are selling and they're just trending in the market at that point. For whatever reason, we look back 6 months later to see what factors made them stay hot or drop back. So we all make maybe a little better decisions about which books we chase in the moment and which books we're patient on. First up this week, we got 19 books, so let's dig into it. First up this week, we got a repeat from last week. We got Trespasser #1 from 2017. This hit the list because it was optioned and there was a director attached. Last week basically was moving from 25 to 75 in terms of sales. There was a lot of sales all through the range. By the second week, it was up to $60 to $100 for raw copies on this, just based on it being optioned. Now it's $10 book. There was one sale for a 9.8 of 100, but this is a big giant dumpster fire. Definitely really high for an option book to go almost to $100, and it did not sustain and hold, as we've got no more news on this. Next, we have 8 Billion Genies #1. Obviously on the list again. This has been on and off the list several times that we've talked about now, because it was the hot book in of the moment last summer and into the fall, and it had been optioned. Back then, raw copies were up to $50 to $60. 9.8s were doing $2 to $235. Now it's a $20 to $40 book. 9.8, $70 to $120, and this has been coming down. And even from the last time we talked about a month ago, new sales are down even further. So this has turned into a trap at this point from the highest sales back last summer and early last fall. Next, we have Dark Horse Presents #36. This is the first Alien versus Predators in comics. And so basically with Marvel relaunching the Predator comics and Aliens comics, as well as the success of the Prey movie, there were rumors of basically a crossover event in the comics, as well as potentially a new movie coming, new Aliens versus Predator movie coming. So far, I don't think either of those things has happened, but that's what caused this book to hit the list. Raw copies back then were going for $25. 9.8 hit $300. Now it's a $5 to $15 book for a raw copy. 9.8 will still cost you around $250, but definitely a trap on the raw side. This is really a $5 to $10 book now. Back then, it was a $20 to $30 book. So next, we have a little bit of an oddity for the list. We have Fantastic Four Full Circle, the hardcover slipcase. This is the Alex Ross project where he did all the art inside. This was a very hot book back then, and this slipcase, which was a little more limited, people were chasing for $60 to $140 back then, which seemed like a lot, but now it's still a $70 to $115, so a little tighter range than back then, but still well within that range. So this definitely rates as a steady and worth it. You will notice I haven't been giving any of my predictions because I did not do a look back or a cash or trash that week. So I didn't have any predictions for these. So that's why you're not seeing that. All right, more comic buzz. We had Uncanny X-Men #123. So this was an interesting one. Basically, this book, the original art for this book there's a panel where Storm's coming out of the bathroom with a towel sort of around her, but one side is exposed. But in the comic, the original comic that people are chasing, it's all shaded out. You can't see anything. But I guess the online version, you could see, like, it was the way it was colored and lit in the comic or whatever, you could actually see everything. So that was causing people to chase this book, because topless Storm, even if it was just one side, and even if the comic itself doesn't have that, that's why people were chasing this book. There was a 700% increase in sales. I guess people realized this or something. I thought this was well known, but anyway, Back then, raw copies were up to $60. 9.8 hit 360. Again, the digital online version had you could see it, but the original you couldn't. But anyway, but now it's a $10 to $50 book, so pretty wide range on raw copies depending on condition. 9.8 so we're down to $2 to $250. So this has definitely turned into a trap. Not sure why people suddenly were jumping on this comic, but they were, but now you can get it for much less. Next, we have Superman number 75, The Death of Superman, and this was hitting the list because there was an announcement. This is when we got the solicitations for the 30th anniversary issue coming. Back then, raw copies were going for $15, a 9.8 hit 285, which weren't really that much higher than typical sales for this book, but because this book is so high printed, it just doesn't go for a ton. But there was a big increase in sales as part of why it was on the list. Now it's still a $1 to $15 book, 9.8, 2 to 250. So it's down, and I'll be back to where it kind of has always been in terms of value. We have had this issue come out, I believe, by now. I thought it came out. I don't actually remember, but I think it's out. This anniversary issue. But yeah, part of my childhood for sure. And yeah, still a cool book, even if there's a ton of them out there. Next, we have Batman number 497. This is the newsstand version that they were talking about back then. And this really was hitting the list because of speculation that we got a 30th anniversary of the death of Superman. We might also get a 30th anniversary of the breaking of the Bat. Don't know if we're getting that yet, but we could still get that later this year. Back then, raw copies were going for $15, 9.8 hit 360 on this newsstand. Now it's still a $5 to $20 book on the raw side for a newsstand version. 9.8, 3 to 450. So the newsstand itself has been steady and worth it. Obviously, you can get the regular direct edition with the black fold over for much less. But this newsstand is a little harder to come by and carries just a little bit more value because of it. With that, we're going to move into covers. And our first cover this week is Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths number 1. The second print, 1 in 25 foil. The image here is just the regular cover, just so you can kind of see the art. But this is the foil version that we're talking about. Back then, this 1 in 25 second print was going for $75 to $100, which, if you follow the rules, says, oh, that's a pretty good sign. Well, I don't know what this book is doing. There's been no recent sales. There's currently only one listed on eBay as of last night when I looked this up, and it was a 9.8 listed for $200. So it's really hard to judge. It appears to, because I guess you call it steady and worth it because you can't really get it. It's not really easy to find or buy at the moment because they're not out there. So I guess you would say worth it because you got it if you wanted it. But yeah, definitely a book that not a huge market for sure. Or if there is, there's not a lot of people selling them, I guess. Next, we have Detective Comics number 1063. Also on the list for the second week in a row, this Yoshitaka Amano 1 in 25. This is a Final Fantasy designer that did this cover. Back then, it was going in week 2, it was up to 60 to 75. Week 1, it was like a 40 to 50 on this 1 in 25. Now it's a 20 to 50. Definitely turned into a trap versus the second week. Always avoid that second week peak. 9.8, 1 to 120 on this one. So there is still a market for this, but it's behaved very much like a typical 1 in 25. That in the first week only gets to around double ratio. Even though it tried to get to triple ratio, and week 2 didn't matter. All right, a couple more covers. We got Power Rangers Unlimited Death Ranger number 1, the Derek Chu 1 in 25. This one was going for 50 to 60. This one behaved exactly like a book that was sitting around double ratio. It is now a $10 to $40 book, ratio or below for the most part, although a few sales still kind of between ratio and double. I shouldn't say a few. There's only 3 sales total in the range of $10 to $40 here, but this one definitely also a trap for this particular cover. Next, we have Sonic the Hedgehog, number 287. CBSI fully admitted they didn't know why this was hitting the list, why people were chasing it. There's no first appearance in this book. So I put it down, I guess, as the cover. Back then, raw copies were going for $100, which was a big jump from what it had been. Now it's still a $40 to $50 book, which is a trap compared to that $100 pricing, but still slightly up from what it was before the whatever caused it to jump 6 months ago. Nobody knows for sure, or at least CBSI didn't know for sure what was going on, at least when they described it. And again, I didn't do a look back this week, or I didn't do a cash or trash that week, so I did not investigate it at the time either. Next, we have Cradle of Filth, number 1. Number 2. Number 1, I don't remember now. What did I write down? So let me look real quick, make sure I get this right. It is number 2, the 1 and 5. Didn't trust my own notes. The 1 and 5 video game variant of Cradle of Filth, number 2. Back then, this book was going for 15 to 20 on this 1 and 5, which is triple to quadruple. And now it's still a $15 to $20 book of this video game variant. 9.8 just went sale, but did go for $130, which is pretty high for a $15, $20 book. So this has been steady and worth it. Which is a little surprising. Normally, for a book that I haven't heard anybody talk about, normally for a variant to hold up, people have to like the story as well. The book has to continue to have some heat, but this one has held up. I guess there's enough people that love the game that are chasing this variant as well. Next, we have Thunderbolts, number 1, the Paulo Sequeira, 1 in 25. I know I butchered his name. I apologize. Raw copies for this were going for $40 to $45, not even double ratio. And now it's a $15 to $35 book, ratio or below, basically. So this is another down and trap, and another 1 in 25 that behaved exactly like the rules when you get a 1 in 25 that doesn't actually get above double ratio. All right, with that, we're going to move into some MCU-related stuff. The first one is kind of weird MCU spec. This is Punisher War Journal number 75. The first appearance of Lynn Michaels as the Punisher. Didn't really have a justification for what rumor or anything that this is going to be a version of the Punisher we're going to see, or this character we're going to see. Other than we knew we're getting more of the Punisher is coming back to the MCU from the Netflix version is going to join the MCU. Back then, raw copies were going for $35 to $50. Now it's a $10 to $30 book, and then definitely another trap, as there's been no substantiation to this rumor, I guess, that caused this book to hit the list in the first place. Next, we have Wonder Man number 1. His first ongoing series from 1991. This was hitting $10, 9.8 up to $200 with announcement that we were getting the show. This might have actually been the casting. I don't know. I'm not sure if this was casting or if this was just announcement about the show. So back then, $10, 9.8, $200. Now it's a $1 to $10 book on the raw side, $60 to $100 on the 9.8 side. So definitely a dumpster fire. We know we're getting the show, but this book has already dropped way down. Even with more recent casting news and everything else, it's not sustaining where it was at. There are a ton of these that you can get, so that's probably why. Next, we have Black Panther number 22. First appearance of Killmonger as Black Panther. This was still a rumor that we might get Michael B. Jordan back as Killmonger, and he might become Black Panther in the lead up to the Black Panther movie. That did not come to fruition. Seemed like a long shot back then, but people were paying $45, $50 for this book back then. And now it's a $15, $20 book. This is a dumpster fire if you chase this book at the peaks of speculation. All right, 3 more books. First up, we have Amazing Spider-Man Annual number 23. This is the first time She-Hulk and Abomination fight each other. So that was why this was hitting the list, because we just had the episode where Abomination first appeared in the She-Hulk show. Back then, raw copies were going for $8 to $25. Now it's a $3 to $10 book. 9.8 only cost you $65 on this. This is down in a trap. They didn't really even fight. He actually just, if you watch the show, you know how it plays out, that they don't actually fight. She actually kind of helps him out through most of the show. Next, we have Avengers number 221. This is the first time She-Hulk joins the Avengers. Obviously, we haven't seen this yet. We know it's coming at some point. But back then, raw copies were going for $15. 9.8 was $270. during the show coming out and people being just hyped about She-Hulk. Now it's a $5 to $15 book and another down, and I'll be back in this case. Yeah, kind of a fun She-Hulk key, but probably not one that's ever really going to be worth a whole lot. And finally, we have Scar, Son of Hulk, #1. Last week we talked about a variant. This is the A cover, the first Scar solo title. Rumors he was going to show up in the show. He did. Back then, raw copies were going for $20, 9.8 going for $184. Now it's a $10 to $25 book, but most of the sales are under $20. 9.8 going for $1 to $175. So we put this as a down, and I'll be back. Marginally could have said steady and I'll be back, but since the 9.8s were definitely below, I put it as down. But that is this week's list. A little bit of MCU, some covers, some comic buzz, quite a bit of different variety this week, but another week where no books went up, a few books were steady, and most of the books went down. That has definitely been the pattern for the last year plus. Ever since the COVID boom in the comics, everything has been correcting and coming back, and that is what we continue to see. I want to thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you next time.